This is a Rough Tiger production.
And you, and you, and you, and you were there. Some of it wasn't very nice, but most of it was beautiful.
I bet you will.
I will
And
not
we're
sing
back.
that on the air. Hello, everyone. Hello, Bryan.
Hey.
Welcome to Dream Idiots. I can hear the sleigh bells ring, ringling outside. Christmas is just a week away. Bryan, have you gotten all your shopping done?
I have happily my family a number of years ago, God, 15 years ago. There was a family-wide decree that said no more gifts. We're not doing gifts anymore. We all have everything we need. No more gifts. Like that just saved me $2,000. So works for me. So
Nice. I just got all my Christmas cards in the mailbox this morning, so
I
that felt
admire
good.
your commitment to that as a technology. It's something I admire in others. I always appreciate getting cards. I haven't sent a Christmas card in God,
Yeah, the
100
Pony
years.
Express rider came through this morning and he popped them in his saddlebag for me.
I
Should
still
be
can't
here by
believe
Easter.
a first class stamp now is went all the way up to 5 cents, right?
That's right. Each week, Bryan and I tell each other stories. Sometimes we have quizzes. Sometimes we have, what else do we have, Bryan? We have quizzes, we have stories,
We have
we
current
have
events, we have
current
random
events.
nonsense, we have various topics that just interest us, and a lot, rabbit holes on the internet that we dive down and then choose to share with you. Broadly, we're kind of entertaining each other, and we're just kind of dragging you along, and hopefully you enjoy the ride.
Yes, and we promised a bunch of surprise drop episodes because we are next week at this time on Christmas Day, or the day after Boxing Day, actually. We will be releasing episode 100. So we will have a surprise drop between now and Christmas Day. Actually, episode 99 will drop at some point in the next week. So be on the listen for that. We will have that going for you. And Bryan, they can find us in all kinds of places, including a big announcement soon, which we'll save for the end of the month, I think.
Yes, announcement coming later on, but you can find us at dreamidiots.com. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Dream Idiots. Drop us a line at dreamidiotspodcast at Gmail. You can find us on every single platform. So we have listeners on Apple and Spotify and Audible and virtually every platform out there. So if you're on there, give us 5 stars. If you don't mind, shoot us a review. That'd be great. And drop us a line to our email if you want. Give us a story idea or suggestion. Actually, I have a couple. Someone did write in and donate some suggestion ideas, which I'm pondering adding in January. So thank you, listeners, for good story
Oh, great.
ideas.
Good. I've had a few come my way as well, so I'm going to look into those. So, all right, we are gearing up for the new year here in episode 101 and beyond. Very cool. It is an even numbered episode 98, which means I get to go first, and I'm going to wrap up my 3-part story that I've been calling Voices of Treason. But Bryan, I think you'll find this person I'm covering tonight very different from the first 2 people. The most unpalatable William Joyce in part 1, the horrible person that was Mildred Gillers in part 2, and I'm going to introduce you to Iva Toguri.
Okay.
Have you heard that name before?
Iva Toguri.
Mm-hmm.
No idea.
She was born on the 4th of July, 1916 in Los Angeles, California. A first-generation American of Japanese immigrant parents, Iva's father Jun wanted his 4 children to be all-American kids. The Toguris spoke English in their household and discouraged speaking or writing in Japanese. They lived on an American diet. Iva was raised a Methodist, became a Girl Scout, and played tennis for Compton High. Sounds like an all-American existence so far.
Right.
She also hiked, lots of places to hike there in Southern California. She listened to swing music. She played piano, and she loved Jimmy Stewart movies, and she might have had a slight crush on old Jimmy himself. She was a registered Republican and voted for Wendell Willkie when it came her time to vote the presidential elections.
Okay.
Iva attended and was graduated from both Compton Junior College and UCLA with a degree in zoology. She had plans to attend graduate school and pursue a medical career. As a graduation gift, her mother Fumi presented her with what would become the worst of all possible graduation gifts, a ticket to Japan in the summer of 1941.
God. Yeah. Bad timing.
There, Iva could have a bit of vacay and visit with a sick aunt. That's not a euphemism. She actually had a sick aunt in Tokyo, just outside of Tokyo, actually. She set sail the day after her 25th birthday, July 5th, 1941. She traveled without a passport and instead had been issued a certificate of nationality by the U.S. State Department. On board with her were 28 pieces of luggage crammed with gifts for extended family in Tokyo, plus Western foods for herself, because she famously hated rice. She stayed with her aunt and uncle and did her best to fit in despite not knowing the customs or the language. As the weeks passed, Iva failed to notice the international events taking place, most likely because she was concentrating on day-to-day living in Tokyo. Okay, so you don't know the language, you don't know the customs, you don't know anything about it. You're just focusing on getting from one end of the day to the
Right.
other.
Right.
Probably not seeing what's going on. That's right. Trying to avoid rice at all possible. While preparing to return home in August of 1941, she contacted the U.S. Vice Consul's office to request a U.S. passport. The office passed along this request to the State Department, and she was informed that the certificate of nationality she possessed would suffice for travel back to the United States. There might have been a paperwork error, but for whatever reason, Iva was denied passage on the Tatsutu Maru in the final week of November. That's bad.
Yeah, I'm aware.
It would be the last ship to set sail for America for the duration of World War II because Pearl Harbor.
Right.
So now she was stuck in Japan during the war where she didn't know the language. She refused to renounce her U.S. citizenship and was classified an enemy alien. The Japanese government didn't trust her because she was American, and even if she were to somehow make it back to the States, she would most likely be shuttled off to Manzanar or some other so-called internment camp for U.S. citizens who happened to be Japanese. She stayed with her relatives, but had continual visits from governmental authorities on the regs. For fear of being imprisoned, her aunt and uncle requested her relocation. So basically, they kicked her out onto the street. Thanks for the food. See you later. She found shelter in a boarding house, but was essentially blacklisted from getting a ration card for most employment by the Japanese government. But she finally found work at the Danish embassy as a translator of English language documents and radio broadcasts. She also taught piano on the side. She enrolled in Japanese language and culture classes in her spare time. Not long after, owing to her native English language skills, she was offered a position by the Dome Tushinsha, the main news agency in the country. Here she translated English language radio broadcasts for Japanese intelligence services. She was still registered as a resident enemy alien, but now she had a bit of freedom regarding incoming broadcasts. She also learned at this time that her family had been relocated to the Gila River Center in Arizona. As so many Japanese Americans of the time,
Right.
they lost their property, they lost their businesses, and were sent off to
Right.
places like Gila
Concentration
River.
camps, right.
Yeah, internment camps.
Internment
I
camp,
believe was
right.
yes.
Summer camps. There was lots of rafting and crafting.
And when the war was over, of course, these folks didn't get virtually any of their
Right.
property back, some of which was valuable farmland, which fell into the hands of corporations and white owners.
No, say it ain't so.
She soon started work with Nippon Hosokoya, the radio and television center of Japan. Now, remember, I said television, but remember, television was in its early stages. It had been around in some form since about 1927, and there was a patent freeze in the U.S. at the time. Right when the war started, they said, "Okay, no more working on TV. We got to focus on the war effort." But there were some kind of television all over the place. John Logie Baird had been working with some things, Philo Farnsworth in the U.S. So television was actually a thing. It just wasn't widespread in wide usage. This was 1943 when she started with Radio Tokyo. She was not an announcer yet, but she still listened to English language broadcasts. She had intermittent work, but found an ally in Felipe de Aquino, a Portuguese citizen with part Japanese ancestry. He was a pacifist and had the same pro-American outlook as Iva. Late in 1943, Toguri joined the broadcasting staff of Radio Tokyo at the behest of its producer, an Australian POW, Major Charles Cousins. Being a native speaker, Toguri's grasp of subtle inflection was far superior to the other announcers, unlike myself, far superior to the other announcers attempting to beguile American soldiers with sentiment through music and stories of home. This was parallel to Germany's propaganda efforts with Mildred Gillers, aka Axis Sally.
Right.
The glaring difference, however, was that Cousins knew that's what the Japanese military wanted. Cousins, therefore, had to sabotage that propaganda as subtly as he could. And in Iva Toguri, he found an ally he could trust. All of the announcers working under Cousins were American or Canadian and used broadcast names such as Madame Tojo or the Nightingale of Nanking. Not a one of them, Toguri included, ever broadcast under the name Tokyo Rose, a fact which would become important years later. Unlike the other women under Cousins' management, Toguri had no experience with broadcasting. Her fellow announcers disliked her voice, which was described as raspy, and she had a noticeable lisp. Her on-air personality was shy instead of direct, playful instead of threatening. Toguri hosted a 15-minute program called 0 Hour, which consisted of an initial jazz piece, followed by news and information, some real, some not. She developed great skill at instant editing as she read, taking the sometimes incomprehensible scripts written in English by Japanese staff and making them understandable. She dropped in, quote, double entendres, on-air flubs, and sarcasm, and the Japanese minders were none the wiser. These programs essentially became comedy sketches, and the butt of the joke was the mighty Japanese Empire. Toguri finally found an on-air name, Anne, short for announcer. Major Cousins became her voice coach, using her lisp and naturally lower register voice to better comedic effect, perfect for deadpan delivery. So I'm thinking here of like, for the great deadpan deliveries, I'm thinking of like a Bob Newhart delivery, or for a modern reference, Aubrey Plaza, with that kind of lower register, just
really
kind of
flat, right?
just flat, yeah. The Major also added orphan to her name, borrowing from the popular comic strip Little Orphan Annie. So she was known as Orphan Anne on the airwaves. Fun fact, and I might do a story on this guy at some point, cartoonist Harold Gray, who created Little Orphan Annie, he fucking hated FDR.
Huh.
Absolutely hated him, to the point where Daddy Warbucks, the adoptive father of Little Orphan Annie, actually dies of a disease that people recognize as the New Deal. And once FDR dies and is out of office, he magically returns to the comic strip. He really hated FDR. Toguri's broadcasts became, in a word, fun, and they worked out to Cousins' plan. U.S. military officials later, years later, credited the program for providing important information about military actions. So one of the things she might do is she might say, if you're west of here, sailors, you might want to listen to my music tonight because it's the last music you'll ever hear, meaning you're about to get the shit bombed out of you, look out.
Right.
So giving these guys out in the open warning that, hey, here it comes. An unnamed general from the U.S. Army was quoted as saying, she served as more effective air raid alarm than our own intelligence. The Japanese propaganda division thought her so successful that 0 Hour was eventually expanded to 75 minutes. Toguri chose her theme music, another in-joke for her American listeners. She chose Seven Nation Army. Dun, 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 dun. No, I'm kidding. It was Strike Up the Band, which is the fight song for
no idea.
UCLA, her alma mater.
Oh, okay.
So she's a little shout out to her fellow UCLAans back in California. Thanks to Cousins and Toguri's teamwork, there was a disconnect between what the Japanese propagandists thought the broadcasts were doing to the American soldiers and what the broadcasts were actually doing. Toguri's voice and style were teasing and happy rather than sultry and enticing. Cousins had assumed that the sense of humor could be heard and understood by the military audience. The American music was interspersed with British popular music to balance out any sense of, quote, cultural loss. In other words, they were going for comfort in the songs rather than nostalgia, because nostalgia is penned with nostalgia. I believe if you look at the way that idea was consisted of, it was kind of a sickness. Nostalgia was considered kind of a mental illness. So they were trying to avoid nostalgia by doing it this
Yeah,
way.
I mean, I know in England, I mean, much earlier than this, you could actually be diagnosed with nostalgia, and there were treatments for it.
Okay, so yeah,
Right,
so
right.
that's what they're going for. And Cousins,
Right.
being an Australian, probably had that British influence.
Right.
Let's avoid this kind of way of thinking. The only real confusion on the part of Cousins and his project was the identity of the announcer known as Tokyo Rose. This seems to have been a catch-all name used by servicemen to address any female announcer of Asian origin. Cousins was absolutely positive that no announcer in his group used that name. If anyone actually did, it came out of another part of Japan or maybe even Korea or China. So as far as he knew, there was no real Tokyo Rose broadcasting.
Hmm.
By 1944, the Japanese intelligence staff began to suspect subterfuge on Cousins' part and took back control of scripts and presentation. Cousins also sustained a severe heart attack and had to retire from regular duty. Toguri tried to reduce her hours behind the microphone and returned to the Danish embassy for work. That lasted for a while, but eventually the Danes broke off relations with the Japanese government entirely. Took you a while, guys. She continued at 0 hour for lack of other work. She began to recycle older scripts. This all came to a halt in August of 1945, with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Toguri and Philippe d'Aquino had married in April of that year, and she had converted to Roman Catholicism, which was Felipe's religion. Everything should have ended right there and then. The d'Aquinos should have headed to America as a happy married couple. But thanks to reporters for Hearst newspapers, this wouldn't come about. Despite the U.S. Office of War's official declaration that Tokyo Rose was, quote, strictly a GI invention, the reporters continued to dig. A bounty of $250 American was out for any information leading to the identity of Tokyo Rose, and Iva Toguri was identified by one of her co-workers. She was arrested October 17, 1945, and spent a month at a local jail and then 6 more months at Tsugamu Prison in another part of Tokyo. She agreed to be interviewed by the Hearst boys and receive a $2,000 fee, but she had to sign a notice, which essentially was an admission to being Tokyo Rose. She later had to forfeit the fee because she mentioned the arrangement with the Hearst papers at a press conference. So she got screwed all the way around on this deal.
Jeez.
The 8th Army's legal branch and other military intel divisions all stated that there was absolutely no evidence that Toguri was Tokyo Rose, or ever identified units by name or location over the air. The U.S. military had broadcast tapes to prove this. She was finally released from prison in October of 1946. During that year, back home, her mother had died, and the rest of the family, freed from the Gila River Center back home, had moved to Chicago. She still needed a U.S. passport, which was denied her, and she could only leave Japan as the wife of a Portuguese national. She waited out another 18 months before finally receiving a valid U.S. passport. She and Felipe welcomed a baby boy during the end of their time in Japan, but sadly he died a few days after its birth. Back in the States, an unwelcome committee was formed against Iva Toguri. Felipe was denied entry into the country altogether. The American Legion wanted Iva sent back to Japan. The Los Angeles City Council opposed her re-entry to the country for any reason other than to go to trial. J. Edgar Hoover put together a unit to investigate her. Radio personality and newspaper columnist Walter Winchell, who had once lambasted the KKK, stood up for civil rights, supported FDR's New Deal, routinely attacked the German-American Bund, fascists of all stripes, Nazis, and Hitler, fomented public support for a charge of treason against her. Winchell had even once recognized Charles Lindbergh and his America First group exactly for what they were, American fascists. But with Toguri, Winchell must have turned his assholeometer up to 11 and broken off the knob because he would very soon become a vocal supporter of Senator Joe McCarthy.
Hmm.
Yeah, Walter, you
Yeah, great company.
whiff that one, bub. Toguri's greatest ally, Major Cousins, had returned to Sydney, a hero. He was pretty much immediately cleared of any treasonous acts. For some reason, the American public could just not overcome the anti-Japanese sentiment that had been so free-floating during the war years. Plus, German equivalents, such as Mildred Gillers and William Joyce, received harsh sentences. In Joyce's case, hanging. The justice system was intent on prosecuting her, despite more military leaders coming forward, like a fellow named Douglas MacArthur. The U.S. Assistant Attorney General also confirmed her innocence and cited the weakness of the case against her. Despite this, Iva was returned to the U.S. on September 25th, 1948, and held in a San Francisco prison for 1 full year before her trial came to court. In the public debate, most servicemen indicated that, quote, she was overtly on their side and that the broadcasts were intended to be pro-American. The trial began July 5th, 1949, exactly 8 years after she sailed to Japan. She faced 8 counts of treason in what would be the most expensive trial in American history up until that point. The tapes, which the military had used to declare her innocent immediately after the war, had somehow been destroyed. Major Cousins testified in her defense. Her lawyer was Wayne Mortimer Collins, a civil rights attorney who would spend some 23 years helping Japanese Americans who had been held at the Tule Lake Relocation Center regain their U.S. citizenship. He put up a hell of a fight for Iva. But in the end, she was found guilty of 1 count, fined $10,000, and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, and she lost her citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, ridiculous and sad, but completely predictable.
She served 6 years, 2 months, and was released on January 28th, 1956, 6 months shy of her 40th birthday. In the subsequent years, it has become apparent that the case against Iva was flimsy and marked with impropriety. From the beginning, grand jurors smelt the whiff of liars, and they were right. 2 witnesses had not testified at her trial because they would have been charged with perjury from their grand jury testimony. One of them was one of the original Hearst reporters who had contacted her in 1945. And then in 1976, a Chicago Tribune reporter discovered that 2 witnesses who actually testified at the trial had committed perjury. This was detailed on a 60 Minutes episode, the TV news program 60 Minutes. On his last day in office, January 19th, 1977, President Gerald R. Ford gave Iva a full and unconditional pardon, which restored her citizenship. In early 2006, the World War II Veterans Committee bestowed upon Iva its annual Citizenship Award. She died September 28th of that year at the age of 90. As a final note, while in federal prison in West Virginia, at a place that had housed throughout the years the double dynamic duo of Squeaky Fromme and Sarah Jane Moore, both of whom had attempted to kill Gerald Ford
Right.
within a 17-day period, Billie Holiday, and Martha Stewart, Iva had often played chess with a fellow inmate who was none other than Axis Sally herself, Mildred Gillers, who I think probably tried to cheat because that certainly seems like something she would do, that horrible, horrible person. And that is the sad story of Iva Toguri, who is labeled Tokyo Rose, and who, in my opinion, was not a voice of treason. She's exactly what she seemed to be, an all-American girl who grew into a woman during the war and went over for what she thought was going to be a month and ended up staying there for a long, long time.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm you talk about wanting to be a fly on the wall. I wonder if Gellers and Toguri, chatted about their experiences at all, and compared notes.
Well, I wonder where all of her anti-Japanese sentiment went. Mildred Gellers, because remember she always warned the German officials about Japanese treachery, and I wonder if she was that mouthy to Iva across the chessboard, or if she held her
Yeah,
tongue.
I mean, you have to think that she probably learned that lesson. You gain some perspective with age. You can't really be that strident in old age, and maybe she realized she was it was all bullshit. But I mean, how typical. She's she's of Japanese descent and she's a woman. Of course, she's going to get completely fucked over. I mean, it's just, oh, you're not a straight white dude. Okay, we're gonna victimize you now. That's just how that's the story of history.
Yeah, and it's funny, and even in the popular vernacular, Tokyo Rose is still listed as,
Yes, someone made it up, right? A convention of something that then just took found a foothold somehow, even though it's not a real
yeah,
person.
yeah. And there's some other stories I might do in the future. There was Seoul City Sioux during Korea,
Uh-huh.
um, and some others that I might do stories on in the future. But that wraps up the initial three-parter. And kind of ends on a hopeful note in a way. I mean, she did get her citizenship back, which was the most important thing to her. She never lost her faith in the American system, despite all the things that she could have done and
Right.
could have said. Um,
She should
that
have.
is, yeah, she should have. She absolutely should have. She's a better person than I'll ever be. That's for sure.
Right. Considering the boat we're in right now, I don't know.
I did
Yeah,
get
very
to
very
gig.
cool.
I did get to giggling at the thought of Seven Nation Army pounding out of a tinny little army radio. And my wife was like, "What are you giggling at?" And I was like, "Nothing. It's ridiculous. I'm being stupid and ridiculous again."
Is this the new Benny Goodman? I like this.
The horn version of the all brass version of Seven Nation Army.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks. All right. So curse words. You ready for curse words?
Oh, I definitely am ready for
Always,
curse
always,
words.
always.
It's time for the Dream Idiots curse word of the week.
Curse word. Actually, are two of them, and I'm sharing two only because they're similar and somewhat related. The first one, bogart. Bogart, to bogart. You're bogarting, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Don't bogart that joint.
Yes. So bogarting something is hoarding something, using too much of it. It comes from. Can you guess what celebrity it's named for?
It's named for Lauren Bacall when she used to do this. No,
Yes,
I'm
apparently
guessing.
Humphrey Bogart had this thing where he would, rather famously, both on screen and in personal life, would balance a cigarette in the corner of his mouth, seemingly while never smoking it. It just kind of sat there, but never actually, no smoke ever came out of it. He never actually was seen puffing it. It would just kind of dangle there. And so that's where we get bogarting. The other one was the term I actually use fairly often, jonesing. Which I think
Jonesing.
yeah.
Yes, that is you're like a junkie. You really need to get something in your system. You are
Craving. Yeah.
craving something big and bad.
Yes. And that comes to us from another celebrity.
Davy Jones of the Monkees.
Correct.
No,
No, you're right.
I am not.
You're right.
I think
No,
you're
actually,
lying.
nobody knows. It's just
Okay.
I was literally going to make the joke. However, it's named for Davy Jones, but you beat me to the joke.
Sorry.
In spite of quite a bit of research, it appears repeatedly, but I have no idea who it's named for. So if you know out there where the term jonesing comes from in terms of if that's a person's name, Chipper Jones from the Atlanta Braves, a baseball player I fucking loathed when he played. I don't know.
It's named after Barnaby Jones,
Brian,
because
there you go.
Buddy
Could
Ebsen
be.
was a notorious heroin. No, I don't know.
Right. So jonesing and bogarting, two good terms.
They are. Yes,
Hmm.
I actually heard the first term Bogart from a Little Feat song. Don't bogart
Oh
that
yeah,
joint.
yeah. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So for my topic this week, since we are in the holidays and We all love, Jesus. This is a little blurb that comes to us from Atlas Obscura. So, if it's the first day of Christmas, what would my true love give me?
A partridge in a pear tree.
Yeah, I don't really know why I would want a partridge, whether it's in a fucking pear tree or not, but you are correct. So
I would take the pear tree.
but yeah, but
Nothing
partridge,
like a good pear. Yeah.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, but yeah, partridge, I don't really get it. So the 12 days of Christmas. So it's a weird thing. By and large, if you're sort of American, well, it is the 12 days of Christmas are generally the 12 days before Christmas, and they're sort of celebrated in reverse chronological order because the first day of Christmas is Christmas Day. And so when this episode drops, technically that will be the seventh day of Christmas. But Western Christian traditions count the 12 days of Christmas as the period after Advent ends on December 24th. And so Christmas Day is the first, and then they're counted forward chronologically. So lasting from the 24th, ending with the Feast of the Epiphany. That's the baptism of Jesus. And then technically the 12th day of Christmas in that model is January 6th, which is our dear friend Billy Shakes wrote Twelfth Night. All the events in the play Twelfth Night occur on January 6th. Eastern Orthodox Christians celebrate Christmas Eve that day. In their tradition, the 12 days don't conclude until January 19th. I don't know. So it's a weird thing. But why are there 12 days? Why are they in the middle of the dead of winter? And why are so many of the days celebrated with birds? And so we're going to discuss this just a bit. So if you were in any ancient culture, the moon typically signaled the start of any unit of measure related to time, right? Any month.
Sure.
So some cultures, it was the arrival of a full moon. Other times it was the start of a brand new crescent moon would start the next cycle. But cultures would pay attention to lowest point of the solar year, winter solstice, which is on the 21st. And just to kind of frame this a little bit, there's kind of some geometry that's connected to this. Over the course of a year, our planet Earth is tilted on one axis, right? So November 21st coincides with the winter solstice, and the sun at that point in time, for those of us in the northern hemisphere, the sun is at its lowest point in the sky, and from here on forward, for the next several months, it's very easy to track the fact that the sun's just beginning its slow trek back to the north, and this phenomenon is flipped in the southern hemisphere. And so that trend in the opposite direction, if you're above the either one of the tropics, that's how that's measured. If you're in the equatorial zone, you sort of track whether on which side of basically high noon the sun is on, and so that's how you can, in ancient civilizations, that's how the motion of the sun and then time is then measured. So the short version is that no matter where you are on the earth, the sun's changing course is giving you shorter days or longer days depending on where you are. Back when you didn't have artificial lights, it was way easier to notice this transition and mark this time, and mark your calendar. And obviously it took a great deal of time to begin to figure out that the earth goes around the sun in 365 and a quarter days. But what folks realized gradually over time is that if you're using complete lunar cycles, a complete lunar cycle from a full moon to the next full moon is actually, I didn't know this, maybe you did, is 29 and a half days. Did you know that?
I thought it was 28. So no, I did not know.
So if you take 12 lunar cycles, 12 months times 29 and a half days, that's 354 days. You're short 11 days or 12 nights. And so back well before the time of Jesus, they realized that, okay, we need to cram 12 days in winter here in order for the calendars to basically
Gotcha.
sync up, to basically to synchronize. So the celebration of Christmas then taking place around the solstice is no coincidence either. Long before anyone celebrated, the alleged birth of Jesus, you had folks in northern latitudes celebrating, new life and dealing with dark days of winter. And this is sort of the pagan times where there are great feasts. It's really, really hard to keep animals, food alive, livestock alive through the winter. And so there is a whole bunch of slaughtering of animals in this period of time. Thus, all the damn birds, calling birds, French hens, turtle doves, geeseling, partridges, all of these. I mean, the 12 days of Christmas is basically a menu, right? Wine, beer, and spirits, fruit and grain are harvested. This is all tied to the winter solstice and 12 days of Christmas. It isn't until Pope Julius I, he's the first pope that actually marks Christmas, or ties December 25th as a feast day of Christmas and tying it to Jesus. And it's Julius I, he of the red hair. That's where Orange Julius comes from, actually. The feast day of Christmas. That's a joke. I'm not. That's more I should do it was a joke. Hopefully people listening knew that was a joke as well. So around, so 46 BC is when you have the Julian calendar that's adopting, is finally adopted, and there's no further need to cram these extra 12 days in there because the Julian calendar basically accounts for it. And so they're there already. But that's why originally it is 12 days. This is just a holdover from a jillion years ago. So regardless of, what your religion is or what you celebrate or whether you're into, more of the pagan rituals, that's where it comes from. It's just a trick of the calendar, really. And I always laugh at the fact that the only item in the whole list of the 12 things that anyone ever knows, at least Americans, because we're idiots, is 5 golden rings. And all the rest of them, people are like, it's like the American national anthem. No one really knows. No one really knows the words. But if you're doing caroling this year, you'll or did when you were a child, you'll recall all the occasions where the whole room of folks yelled simultaneously, 5 gold rings. It was the only line they knew.
Yeah, because it's the only one that's. Is it the only one that's inorganic?
Well, technically, the five gold rings actually refers to a bird as well, because it's there's a bird.
Oh, well, shit.
There's a bird called a gold chick that has rings around its neck. That's all. Technically, it's also a bird.
Okay.
And then the ones above it are, so you have the partridge, you have 2 turtle doves, 3 French hens, 4 calling birds, 5 golden rings. You have geese laying, swans a swimming. Do you remember eight? Do you remember from eight and above?
11 lords a leaping.
No, it's 10 lords leaping,
11 lords a leaping,
11 pipers piping, which they're just stoners.
12 well, I was gonna say 12 tokers toking, but that's not
right.
That's not right.
Right. 6 moo cows grazing.
What is it? A beer in a tree. Bringing the old McKenzie Brothers version.
Right. Yeah. So maids a milking. They're not milking, they're a milking. 9 ladies dancing, 10 lords a leaping, 11 pipers piping, 12 drummers drumming. Yeah, whatever.
That is really fascinating, Brian. I didn't know there was a connection between the lunar cycle and the 12 days of Christmas. So that's how they made up for the missing days in the calendar before they switched over to the 366 days a year with the leap year then.
Yeah, essentially.
Wow. Yeah.
And there are just a boatload of other random stories about, sort of the origins of where the song came from. It's between 16th and 18th century in England. at the time, being Catholic was not necessarily a very popular thing to be, and so it's alleged that this was an underground thing for Catholics to use to teach their children the faith, because the partridge is actually Jesus, and then day 2 is Old and New Testament, and then the 11 is the 11 apostles, blah blah blah. So it's all this subterfuge in order to teach your little Catholic children to stay Catholic. But my argument against that is, why would Protestants care? It's all the same shit, right? So it's like, okay, so teach them religion. It's not really, nothing what you're teaching there is directly Catholic. It's just directly Christian, so that's probably fine, right? But whatever. There's a ton of other sort of myths about where different things came from, but originally it was just a spring forward, fall back kind of thing.
So, as you offered to say as a punchline, this is actually the story of Jesus, like you always say.
It's the story of Jesus. Every week on Dream Media, it's just the story of Jesus.
It's the story of Jesus. Fascinating, Brian. That is, I never knew that. That is very cool.
Yep, there you go.
All right, so we got some treasonous radio in, we got some drug words in, and some Jesus. I love it.
Happy holidays.
just another Monday night in Texas. It's great. Well, cool. Well, thank you, Brian. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, folks, for listening.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in there with us. Yeah, please shoot us a review on the various platforms out there. Give us 5 stars. Check us out on dreamidiots.com, Instagram and Facebook at Dream Idiots. We'd appreciate it. And we've got a whole bunch of cool shit coming.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to the new year. We're looking forward to the holidays coming up. And I will tell you this, Brian, as a Christmas gift to you, I'm not going to do another college quiz at the end of the year for you.
No, we can't do those ever again, because the last one I won, I refuse to do any more.
No, the rules are that if you win, you get the honor. You win. Yeah, exactly.
Shit. Okay.
No, but that's my Christmas gift to you. You will not have to do another college
Gotcha.
quiz in 2023. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. Be good to each other.
This is a Rough Tiger production.
Bong bong,
Mhm.
Brian.
Bong bong?
Bong bong.
Bong bong. Good.